With 50 million people trapped in forced labor and forced marriages, slavery is more pervasive now than at any other time in human history. It's a horrible statistic, but there are people moving mountains to make slavery a thing of the past through legislation, public awareness, and global partnerships. And we now have the privilege of witnessing a conversation between two of them. We're so pleased to have the youngest ever UN Goodwill Ambassador for the United Nations Association of Australia. She's the founding director of Walk Free, an international human rights organization whose team successfully campaigned for the Australian Modern Slavery Act, the strongest legislation of its kind, and is now pioneering a global slavery index. Welcome, Grace Forrest. And joining Grace is a woman whose story is nothing short of remarkable. Forced into slavery in a clothing sweatshop around the age of 10, she managed to escape and, against all odds, secure a loan to set up Local Women's Handicrafts, a social enterprise in Kathmandu, enabling women to escape labor exploitation and achieve financial independence. She's gone on to found the NGO Empowerment Collective, so no girl in Nepal has to experience what she did as a child. Welcome, Nasreen Sheikh. Here, in conversation, are Grace and Nasreen on ending modern slavery.
Nasreen, it is so wonderful to be here with you today to discuss the Sustainable Development Goals and how it intersects with an issue that is something that we're both dedicating our lives to in modern slavery. I would absolutely love it if you could please introduce yourself to this audience, because everyone here is privileged to know you, and I'm so looking forward to us breaking down some of these global figures and you sharing your exceptional activism around the world with this group.
Grace, I'm extremely grateful to share this screen with you together today. You represent a huge hope in my life, and how much you have been working for this last 6-7 months, continuing to bring this figure out of these 50 million people currently living in modern day slavery. As you know, that out of those 50 million people, those are just not numbers and figures and data. Those are faces and desires and dreams and faces like me. Out of those 50 million people, I was one of them. And I can go and tell my story forever, but I was born in a small undocumented village where people, their birth and deaths were not recorded. I was born in completely male-dominated society where women had absolutely no rights. And as I saw that how as a single mother, my mother was struggling to raise her kids, and she wasn't educated. She didn't have any skills or anything to take care of her child. So that pushed me into a slave labor, and I became a child slave labor at the age of 9 or 10-year-old at 10 by 10 room with 6 others. We worked, we slept, and we produced not hundreds but thousands of garments, and we worked 7 days a week for like 12 to 15 hours a day, making same thing over and over and over. And my body as a human did not felt like a human. I became a machine, and like that my childhood was stolen. So today we are going to go more deeper into these numbers and how just to share about like these new statistics and new data that came. Please tell me more about it. I'm very excited to hear, but also very much serious to take it to the next level, that we need to address these issues now.
Nasreen, that's exactly right. We need to address these issues now. And I just want to say how grateful I am for you sharing your story with all of us here today, because as you said, these figures represent 50 million individuals. And something that you and I are both so committed to is that we believe in the inherent value of every human life. And the fact we're talking about tens of millions of people living in modern slavery on any given day in 2021 is just simply unacceptable. Your story is one that is feeding into the global trends of what we're seeing here. Modern slavery remains an issue that is deeply gendered, with women and girls making up well over 50% of the figure. And actually a quarter of all people living in modern slavery are children, despite the fact the UN has committed to eradicating all forms of exploitation for children by 2025. It's already 2022, and the situation is getting worse. But I think something that we want to relay for every person today is that modern slavery is something that never happens in isolation. It is a man-made problem connected to both historical slavery and persisting structural inequality. And in fact, industries of historical slavery that people watching might be aware of, such as cotton, tobacco, sugar, persist today in the world as industries that are highly exploitative. And I want to come back to that in regards to industries, in regards to fashion, which we know from the last Global Slavery Index is the second biggest contributor to modern slavery, entrapping and ruining the lives of hundreds of thousands of people, like young women like yourself, who were robbed of their childhood and their most basic human rights, so people can have access to fast fashion in countries like the US, where we both sit. I wondered if you could share with us a little bit about what it felt like when you arrived in the US and you saw these garments being sold on every street corner, and you knew their backstory, and so many people do not.
That's a very deep question for me. Thank you, Grace. I remember when I came to America and I walked to this major department store, and as I touched these fabrics, as I saw these things, not just a fabric, but the chocolates, the coffees, there was no information. They didn't say what it made and who made, which company it made, you know, and that was really shocking to me. And I saw that how people were happily buying things without even thinking about it. They were so disconnected within themselves, you know. So now, after a lot of research, I coming to understand that there is some emptiness that we feel within these massive rich countries, that we like to fulfill our desires and need, and we have become so disconnected that we are consuming things that contain slavery, that contain suffering. You know, I still remember when I would work 12 to 15 hours a day in that sweatshop, and I had no one to talk to. So I started to talk to the clothes I would make, and I would say that whoever is going to wear these clothes, I hope they can feel my blood, feel my tears, feel my suffering. And then 10 years later, I come to US and I see those people and I see who were wearing my suffering. And so I know that people, they just don't know the true information. That's where the transparency comes, you know. If we can inspire these businesses, governments, and medias to really come together and help us bring transparency around the supply chain. My supply chain was like, it was so broken into pieces. Like on the surface level, everything was just so, like, you know, perfect looking, and there was a big factory that looks everything perfect and good, and there's a small factory, tiny factory, and then all of a sudden there is a tiny room in unmarked buildings where these agents use undocumented people like me, undocumented children like me, you know, who have no rights, you know, no rights. We didn't even had aid kits in our sweatshop. We didn't even had a bed. I slept on the clothes that I was making every single night. And like that, I spent 2 years of my precious childhood that put me into my complete lifelong trauma that I'm still healing, you know. So if the companies would have been looking for their supply chain transparency, that my face would have been never in that slavery. And you see, like today number is 50 million. I'm curious to learn from you. What do you think the companies and the government or media could do to bring 50 million faces like how I am today? You know, these are human beings. These are girls. These are young women, you know, that have a desire to solve and become a problem solver or leaders and change makers. Yet they're stuck in this 10 by 10 room with nothing, with no dream.
Exactly, Nazreen. And as you say, this exploitation is not an accident. People are benefiting from it. People are benefiting from the suffering of others. And when we think of historical slavery, so many people would think, I would fight against that if I saw that now. But the truth is, we need to fight against this slavery that we're living in at this moment in time. This is not relegated to history. And we need to step up as consumers, as business leaders, as government leaders, and we need to hold power to account. So let's break down that 50 million number just quite quickly. 50 million people on any given day in 2021 living in modern slavery equates to 1 in every 150 people on Earth. Of that figure, we know 28 million people were living in forced labor. That's more than the entire population of Australia. And that 22 million people were living in forced marriages. This number of 50 million indicates a 10 million person increase from this latest global estimate produced by Walk Free, the International Labour Organization, and the International Organization for Migration. It indicates a 10 million person increase from the last one. That is equal to the size of the population of Greece living in modern slavery since 2016. And we know that this vulnerability is building because of compounding crises throughout the world, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, the climate crisis, conflict, and war. What all of these things have in common is that they compound vulnerability for the world's most structurally disadvantaged. Nazreen, you speak so powerfully about the fact that your mother did not have a choice about the options that she gave her daughters. These were the best, worst options to keep her children alive. This kind of structural poverty does not happen by accident. And I think the last thing I want to mention here, because we've talked about global supply chains, is that modern slavery itself happens in every country and cuts across cultural, ethnic, and religious lines, as well as underpinning our global economy. So the increase in forced labor that we are seeing throughout the world is entirely due to global supply chains and global businesses. So we want every person watching this, whatever coffee you drank this morning, whatever clothing you're wearing, look at that tag and ask that brand, who made my clothes? Where did the cotton come from? Because exploitation is sitting behind so many of the products that we're buying and using every single day. And it's just not good enough that we think of this as a problem that happens over there, because there is no over there in a globalized world. We are deeply connected to each other.
Absolutely.
And if you are not a part of the solution, you are part of the problem.
That's a really, really good way to say it. And I do believe that we are, in the end of the day, we are human, you know. Or if you see it, today date, we have more billionaire than ever. And at the same time, we have the most, like 50 million modern day slaves victims, you know. And those people, they are not asking for much. They're asking for basic human rights, you know. We are asking for clean water. We're asking for nutritious food. We're asking for the least education so we can read and write and ask for our own rights, you know. So how do you think the SDG will play this role to really help modern day slaves come out of that situation? Because we don't have a voice. Like really, when I was in the sweatshop, all I needed is somebody to come and help me. And really, when my sweatshop gets shut down, I become a street kid, and no human, no organization, nobody come to help me. A dog, an animal that comes and sniff on me, and behind this dog is a gentle, kind person that helped me get out of that situation. So how do you think the SDG goal will help these people come out of that slavery and that situation?
I think first and foremost, Nazreen, it is about every person and institution, every UN official, every government leader understanding that modern slavery is the antithesis of sustainable development. If you have modern slavery, you cannot reach any of the global goals. In fact, we cannot save the climate while harming other people. We cannot pursue gender equality while women and girls represent the vast majority of people living in modern slavery. We cannot strive for economic development when tens of millions of people are structurally held down. So for me, it is about, and for us at Walk Free, for you at the Empowerment Collective, for our movement, pushing the point that modern slavery sits at the base of all sustainable development. We need to eradicate modern slavery, prevent it where it occurs, and tackle it with, and most importantly, fronted by survivor leadership like yourself, because lived experience is expertise, and your wisdom and insight is what the world desperately needs. There is too much separation between those that are living through these experiences and those that are making decisions. And it's time that we center voices and leaders like you, Nazreen, because you and your communities have the answers to these solutions, not people with pens in high towers.
No, Grace, equally, I feel like more women like you and yourself who are so completely dedicated to, and have seen you in person, and how much you fly all around the world to get this data number. We need more women like you. We are sisters and brothers in this planet, in this moment right now. And what is my fault to be born in that situation and be a slave, you know? So together, we all together, if we can even ask where my things come from. People say, where is slavery? Where is slavery? Slavery is right next to your clothes, or right right next to the drinks that you're taking. And you deserve, as a human being, a kindness, love, and care. You do not want to consume suffering. So ask for your companies, your government, for transparency and supply chain transparency, all transparency, all entire supply chain, not just surface level, but everything. And I hope that SDG goals will include that information. The UN and the government will come together to really give a voice to people like us. We are not asking for much. We just want to be a human, just like you. We also have a dream, you know, we want to be preserving our own cultures and traditions. So Grace, I'm extremely grateful for these opportunities that we got to connect, and hopefully more and more people can join. Please visit Walk Free and Empowerment Collective, learn more and support our work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And please, if you take anything away from this, remember that our system is not broken. It was built this way, and we can rebuild it a new way. Nazreen, thank you so much as ever. We are privileged to listen and learn from you. And thank you so much to the SDG Action Zone for prioritizing and centering modern slavery that is so often put off the agenda.
Thank you, Grace.